Hello and welcome. Today we are going to be building something fun. Something that I've been meaning to do for a while. So let's just dive in. Let's just focus in on the code and get some stuff done. I'll be watching the chat, so any questions, throw them my way. Otherwise, we're just going to be coding. Let's get on with it. So I've got this Laravel application. I'm using JetStream. I've done a little bit of data modeling. I haven't done too much. Got projects. You can see we're starting to list projects out. Each project has a key. It's got a title. Each project can have many channels, and channels receive events, and events happen at a specific point in time. So here is the code. Let's go through some of those models quickly just to kind of give that high level overview. So a project is super simple. We've got a name, a key, and what team it belongs to. That is a JetStream team. A JetStream team. The only thing I've added is a logo, so I'm going to add the ability to kind of add a logo a little bit later. So then it's got many channels. Each channel has a name and a project it belongs to. Channels are super lightweight. It's just a way to kind of dissect events that come in. An event, got a name, description, icon, any tags for channel, an identity, exciting, project, and when that event actually occurred. So I'm just going to zoom in a little bit because I realize it's a bit zoomed out there. So what is an identity? It can be anything. The idea here is that when you're sending events from your application to this application, what it is it could be an API token, it could be a user ID, it could be an account ID, it could be any way that you want to identify something or someone. Nice and easy. And then it's got a list of properties that you can start to build upon. So the idea here is that, let's say, we'll take an example, like a payment received event. So a payment is received by your application, Stripe webhook comes in, you capture that, and you want to kind of track that on another platform. That's what this is going to do. It's, you know, you've got a project which could be called, I don't know, we're going to call it Livewire because I'm using Livewire anyway. So this is a Livewire project, and we've got the payments channel. When a payment is received, we say, okay, send this event and a little bit of additional data over to the platform, letting, storing that log that this event has happened. Nothing extravagant, nothing too crazy, but something a little bit fun, something that we can dive into a little bit. So let's have a look at some of the stuff I've done so far with a UI. We've got a project list. All we've got so far is this. So Livewire project list. This is just listing these projects. And what we're doing is we're getting the team, we're getting the channels, and we're getting the events. And we're going to order that by the latest occurred at. And then we're going to say where the team belongs to the current user's current team ID. And we're just going to get them. We can paginate later. Not a big deal, but we'll see. Hello, Laravel Jutsu, or otherwise known as Ludovic. So this UI, as you see, you'll see that I'm doing something slightly different to what comes as standard. I'm returning a return type, and I'm actually injecting that view factory so I can return factory mate. It's just a little bit nicer. I don't mind using helpers, but I don't want to all the time. So as you can see, I'm using the view factory just to make a view and passing in that data. Nothing crazy, nothing out of the ordinary. We come down to our resources and views. You see we've got the normal stuff going on here that you get with JetStream, but down in here in pages, this is Laravel Folio. As you can see, we've got a welcome view. Inside projects, we've got Laravel Folio kicking it off. And we've got a name for that view, which is pages projects index. We're just saying projects in the header slot. And then in this section down here, we're just saying, okay, show that project list component using Livewire. So if we go to Livewire, what we'll see is we've got XUL, which is just a list component that I created, and then an XLI, which is a list item component. These are just super simple components. Here's a UL, nice and simple. It's got a roll of list, divide Y, divide gray, nothing crazy. LI, all we're doing is merging the attributes so that by default it's got a minimum of padding top and bottom of 4 and passing through that slot. So we've got an image, project team logo, project team name, just here. There we go. Then we've got a P class with just standing out a little bit to give that project a name. This will probably link to that project specifically. So we can do something like root, wrong one, root pages projects show. And then we're going to say that the project we want to send it is the project that we're currently on. So if we come back to this UI, this should now link. And it does. Nice and simple. JetStream T. So the project key. So what's going to happen is this project key needs to be sent through as a header. Just kind of like an extra layer of authorization on top of API keys. We'll get into that a little bit later. Then we're just doing a quick count on the channels. And then we're saying that the last event, when it occurred, to date time string, but we're going to show the diff for humans in the UI. And that is all we've got so far. Something really simple. We're using Wire Navigate because if we're going to use Livewire, we may as well use it. I apologize about any squeaking. I think I need a new desk chair. We've obviously got all the team settings. I've enabled the profile and the profile image, as well as the API tokens, which we will customize a little bit later on. Well, this squeaky office chair is going to drive me mental. So what I've started to do as well is if we come over to our enums, we've got a team role. And what you'll see is each role has a label, it's got a description, and it's got the permissions. You'll recognize that part as what comes by default with JetStream. We've then got the editor here, and I've added an additional one called member. We'll just rename that. There we go. And members only have the ability to read. They can't create, they can't update, and they can't delete. I thought it made sense to add an additional role there just to have it available. You never know, right? In our JetStream service provider down here, we are registering these. So now I can grab this and I can say, now I want to add that member. And there we go. We're using this permissions, which comes from can access attributes. So we're going to return this attributes, which just creates a reflection class constant based on the enum, based on the name. This uses a string-backed enum as a mixin on the trait so that static analysis and type hinting all ties together nicely. We then get the attributes that match a specific attribute, such as this one. Then we get the first one, we create a new instance, and we get the label from it. It's that simple. Nice, clean, and easy, using PHP attributes, enums, and a trait to bind it all together. And suddenly we get a nice way to register our roles like this. So this default API token permission is read. Now we could go a step further and we could make these enums as well, but I don't think it's needed. I think that would just be kind of chasing that rabbit hole of being Steve a little bit too far. So if we just close all that down, what I'm going to do now is we're going to look at how we can, oops, wrong button, how we can kind of accept events coming into the application. So we're going to have an API, obviously. So let's work on a quick test. We're going to, it's going to be a post request because there's going to be data. You're going to set the name as ingress. So I do a lot of this at work, looking at data ingress and that sort of stuff. You get a payload, you want to do stuff with it. Yeah, it's important stuff. And the way that we do that has got to be really thought out. Can I see a show of hands in the chat for anybody who may do this sort of stuff as well, just out of interest while I sip my coffee? So how can we ingress data? So the first thing we need to think about is the sorts of data we are going to accept. Now, to do that, we need to think about what sort of events will be sent to us. It won't just be the one type. There will be a few. So the way I'd like to do this is to come over to HTTP here, create a new directory, and we're going to say, okay, we're going to start accepting some payloads. What is Unified Event Tracker? So basically, it is an API that you can send events to from your application to start kind of looking at analytics and analysis of events that are perhaps going on in your application. That's about it. If I'm honest, it's nothing more than that. So we are going to accept an event. Let's just say don't ask again because we're not going to want to keep doing that. So if we say public function construct, so if we come over to here, what we want to look at is cloud events. So there's a cloud event specification, which is a specification for describing event data in a common way. It focuses on consistency, accessibility, and portability. There is a PHP library available. However, it's not the nicest. I'm not going to lie. It's a little bit ugly. So what we're going to do, we're going to do something similar. So if we look at this cloud event interface, come over to V1, cloud event trait, what you see is got an ID, a source, type, data, data content type, data schema, subject, and time. All of these things are somewhat useful. So we know that we're going to have an ID, a source, type, data. We're going to have a lot of this stuff going on in what we're going to build. So let's start to kind of flesh this out a little bit. So public read-only string data, ID, sorry. So each event should have an ID. It's going to have a source. So public read-only string source. So if we kind of just put some comments as we go along, so this could be a random ID that matches things together. So let's take an example. That request comes in. You send an event straight away saying, request from Stripe. We give it the request ID. Later on in that request lifecycle, we realize that it's a payment request. So we can say, okay, so using that same request ID, I'm going to send another event, but with a different type. I'm going to say that, oh, this was a payment. So we've got that request event coming through. We then have that payment event coming through. We can then dive down and do an identify event. We've got this chain of events of what's going on within our application so that we can understand that a little bit more. So source. This is, your application name as an example. So this could be, I don't know, forge.laravel.com. That could be the application name that's coming through. The next thing that we might look at is the type. So we say public read-only string type. So this is the identifying type of the event. I.e., can't type today. We're going to start with com, vendor, which in this case would be Laravel, and it could be a request was received, or it could be a payment, or it could be a subscript. I can't see my monitor. Subscription. There we go. It could be anything like that. So the next thing we look at is that data. So public read only. For now, I'm just going to type it as an object. The event payload. So this is very similar to what you might want to look at when you're building webhooks, because webhooks are just events at the end of the day. You want to standardize them to an extent. The next thing is data schema, not useful. Data content type, also not useful for what I'm doing. Subject, maybe not what I need right now. But the time is useful. So we're going to have, oh, that's definitely not what we're going to have. We're going to have a public read-only, date time, immutable, as the timestamp. When did this event occur? And that's what we care about. So let's simplify that a little bit, and let's just make all of these read-only. So let's walk through this now. We've got an ID, which ties everything to one specific point. This ID is not like your database ID. It is about that external source, what happened, and identifying it at that external level. What's also going to happen here is we're going to come and create a contract. Contracts here, HTTP payloads, and we're going to create a quick contract within here, and we're going to call this event data. This is an interface. So this event is going to be an event's data payload. So the payload within there. So we're going to have things such as an identify event. This is going to implement the event data. When we're identifying, we want to create an identifier. So we're going to have a public function construct. This is to create it. So we then have a public read-only string for the identifier. And then we're going to have a public read-only array for properties. We can make this read-only. That's all we care about at this point. So we can say we've received a new event, which is an identify event, and we can do something with it. We're also going to have something like an ingress event, which is a standard record event. So we call that a record event or a record event. This again will implement the event data. We say public function construct. Now, if we open up the event class over here, we can pop that over there. And what we're going to capture at this point is public read-only string name. public read-only string for the description, public read-only string for the icon. Let's just come up here, make sure we're getting it all right. I didn't add tags. Create events table. Is tags nullable? Yes, it is. So icon, property, null as collection tags. Next up, we have public read-only array for the tags that we might want to pass over. And that is the majority of it. I mean, the channel is going to be passed through. So we're going to say public read-only string for the channel. Because what we're going to do at this point is pass through that channel name. Public read-only string identifier and public read-only string for the project. And that should be it. That is all we want to collect on that point. So let's make this read-only. And let's fix that whole file. So we've got a record event and we've got an identify event. That's the two main things that we want right now. If I can close all of that off, come over to this event data, we're going to have an additional method on here. So public function to array. How do we want these events to be turned into an array to save in the database? We can return an array. So identifier will be this identifier, and properties will be this properties. And the reason for this, I don't know why that is complaining. Fix the whole file. Iterable stuffs. Return an array of string mixed. Done. And the properties is going to be string mixed as well. That's the iterable types worried about. Why aren't I using GitHub Copilot or any other AI code assistants? So the reason I'm not using AI Copilot or anything like that is because it just doesn't work for me. It works for other people, don't get me wrong. It gets in my way when I'm writing code because I like to write code very specifically in a specific style, in a specific way. So that is the reason, I suppose. Let's just start this now. So return an array. We're going to have the name. This name. The description is this description. Icon is this icon. Tags is this tags, which could be null. Channel identify project. Sorry, none of them matter to me at this point. So this is going to return an array of string mixed. And the tags are going to come through as an int string. And that is everything. So record event and an identify event. That gives us this here. So now if we add a public function to, actually no, we're not going to worry about that yet. We're going to come back to here and we're going to go start looking at a controller. So if we come over here and we can say API we're just going to create one controller first. We're just going to call that the ingress controller. Ingress controller. This will have an invocable method, so public function invoke. That will accept a request, but we want to make sure that we're validating the payload. So let's come here and say, make a request, API ingress request. That's the first thing that we need to do. Let's just say always add, and this is an ingress request for the request. So clean this up a little bit. Make it Stevified. We can get rid of all of that for now. So let's look at the rules. This is going to accept an event. So we know that we want an ID. This is required. Should be a string. Minimum length of 2 with a maximum length of 255, so it does not break our database. Source. This is an application name, so this is required. It should be a string. We're going to set that minimum length again to 2 and a maximum length of 255, so it doesn't break our varchar. Type, the type of event that is coming through is required. Should be a string. Again, a minimum length of 2 and a maximum length of 255. Nice and simple to understand. Data is required, and we're expecting that to come in as an array. I think that's a validation rule, but we'll check later. And then time stamp. I believe there's a validation rule for this, but I cannot quite remember. So we're just going to say required for now, and we're going to come and look at the Laravel docs and look at the validation rules. So validation, available validation rules. There's not a timestamp. There's a date. Date equals date format, decimal. There's not one that I can see that's going to stand out right now. I can't do time zone. So we're just going to stick with required for now, and we'll kind of come back to that validation there. So there's an ingress request. It's going to return an array of string array int string. What I like to do on this is say public function payload. This is going to return an event payload. So I can say return event from request, and then pass through the data as I need to. So come over this event over here, and we can say public static function from request. That is going to receive an array of data, and it's going to return an event. So what we want to receive here on this array is an ID, which is a string, a source, which is a string, type of the string, data as an array, and a timestamp as a date time immutable. So that's how I like to do this. So that allows me to then say return a new event. The ID is data ID, where the source is data source, type is data type, data is data, and the timestamp is data timestamp. That is nice and simple. and it hasn't got any logic. It is all just nice and clean. Why is this complaining? This bit here. So this is going to be string mixed. So event data. So we need to look at that part there. So for now, what we're going to do is the ID is wrong thing. This string ID to string. Then the source is this Mondays. Am I right? String source to string. Type this string type to string. We're going to do timestamp next. So then we can say this get timestamp. What we want to do is say new date time immutable. So the date time is that. So we can then go fix all of that. Expect string. To string, resolve that. Unhandled exception, we'll worry about that in a moment. So the data, that's what we need to think about next, is how are we going to take that flexible data, which is coming through as an array, and create an event from it. So we need some form of factory. So we're going to come over to here, we're going to say create factories. We're going to have a payload directory, and we're going to have event factory. So this will have a public static function detect, which receives an array of data and return event data back. So what we need to do within here is this ingress request over here. What we want is the data is going to be event factory detect this get data. We've got to make sure that we cast this to an array. So data, that is going to actually come through as an event data. That should resolve all of those problems, and away we go. So I'm going to close that down now because it's going to complicate the view. So this event factory detect, there's different types of event. So what we can actually do, not that one, sorry, event factory over here. So we know that this is going to come through as an array. Wrong keys. There we go. String and mixed. So we've got two different types of events right now. If we come down to our payloads, we've got a record event and we've got an identify event. So what we can do is in this event factory and say if array key exists, the key is identifier, the array is data. At this point, we know this is an identify event. Now, eventually, I'd like to move this to a different approach, but for now, this will achieve what I need it to achieve. So this identify here, we need a static method to do the building. So public static function from array. We're going to accept an array of data, and we're going to return an identify event. Return a new identify event. The array that we're going to receive at this point needs to have identifier as a key, which is a string, and it needs to have properties as an array, which is going to be string mixed. And that is that part done. So that now we can say that our identifier is data identifier, and the properties is data properties. That allows us to turn this data, random data coming in here, to identify event from array data data. So next, what's that complaining about? Fix the whole file quickly. Array key exists. Should return event data. Return statement is missing. Okay. Now, if it's not, we're just going to return a record event from array where the data is data. We're going to fix it up now. So this record event, we need to add this in. Public static function from array data, record event, return new record event. That should keep that happy. Yeah, there's not much I can do about fixing that right now. So this part here, we want to accept an array. That array should have the following fields: name, string, description, string, icon as a string, tags as an array, and that array should be an int string. The channel should be a string. Identifier should also be a string. And the project should also be a string. That's cleaning all that up. So we can say name, data name, description, data description, icon is data icon, tags, data tags, channel is data channel, identifier is data identifier, and our project is data project. That resolves all of that. This event factory now works. It's got a complaint here, but there's only so much I can do, right? So that event factory is there. This ingress request will then turn everything into a payload as I would want it to. So I can come over to here, close these down. Okay, return type. And we're just going to say that this is going to return string mixed. Ingress request, that's good. Ingress controller. At this point, we should have validated. So we can do something simple like a DD request payload. Come over to API over here, and we can just say ingress controller. We're going to copy that. I'm not having a good day for typing today. I really am not. So there we go. That is that part there. So if I come to HTTP, and we're just going to go over to, where is it? Orb stack over here. We're going to copy this and go HTTP API ingress 404 not found. Do a post request. Post method is not supported. Oh no, that doesn't actually have ingress. Current team unknown. Awesome. So headers accept application JSON. Perfect. We're starting to get validation going on. We are going to say that the content type we are sending is application cloud event plus JSON. So we need to remember this part. We want to add some middleware. So make middleware accepts cloud events. So accepts cloud events, declare strict types, make this final, clean this up, just fix all of that. And we're going to simplify that one. We're also going to simplify that one and get rid of this extra space that seems to be floating around. There we go. If request has, if we have the header content type, or sorry, if we don't have that content, the header for content type, we need to reject. And then if the request header content type does not equal that, we also want to reject. So how do we want to reject? The best way I think to do this would be to use a package. So composer require treble, not that, API responses and error codes. This is what I need. Perfect. So we can return a new error response like this. The data is going to be a new API error. The title is going to be missing header. The detail is going to be missing content type header. The instance is going to be request full URL. And let me just go through and make sure everything's all lining up. Yeah, I just need the code next. So the code is going to be error code bad request. What's that complaining about now? Parameter string. And we're just going to say name there. And the status is going to be status bad request there. Let's go have a look at this, blah, blah, blah. Error response, implements responsible. Okay, so I need to adapt this to be or responsible. There we go. So again, if we are failing at this point, we want to do something different. Invalid content type. Content type should be application cloud events plus JSON. Let's just fix that typo there. Bad request, cool, done. So responsible accepts cloud events. What I'm going to do is just drop this all down onto a new line. And we're just going to tie this middleware in directly. And there we go. So if we just don't display that a second, missing header. And if we just replace that with that, invalid content type, awesome. And we could just turn this into cloud events plus JSON. And let's just make sure that that is correct. Okay, so what's going on? What's going on there? Content type. Fix that. Cloud event. Cloud event. Cloud event. There we go. We got there. Line 9. Middleware line 9. Type in the error string showing. Yeah, got that. Got it. Cheers, dude. Cheers, Ollie. So at this point, we are here. So then if we go to the body and say we are sending over an ID, this would be something random that ties back to the URI. The source that we're going to send is, my application name. The type is going to be com dot JustSteveKing dot west. Awesome. Timestamp is going to be, let's just open up Tinker quickly. Let's just go to random one here and say now timestamp to time string. That isn't going to work. Let's just say we're going to set that one to, what am I on? Event Horizon, this one. We're going to set up Docker and we're going to use that. Refresh, close, and go. Unexpected something. Now. Okay, so surely I think there's a way you can say like timestamp from now. There you go, just going to grab that. Timestamp is that. Cool. So the data we want to send, this is the part that's a bit more dynamic. So if we go and say, for now, we're going to do a record event. The name is going to be something happened. Oh, no, this should be an object. Sorry, my bad. Here we go. Something happened. Still complaining. Data field is acquired. So name, description, something happened. I want to remember. Icon. Let's go to the emoji. Search emoji. We're just going to grab the rocket, copy that to the clipboard, and paste that in. tags. We can pass through an empty array. Channel. Sales. Identifier. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Properties. Ooh. Let's go back and just double check this event factory from here. Project. Like that. Aha. Undefined array key. Properties. So from array, it's going to give me all of that. Ingress controller, going to create the payload, data, detect. So this should all be working now. Why isn't it? Identify event. We're trying to create an identify event, but we shouldn't be. If array key exists, no, we do have identifier. Identifier is in both. So properties. There we go. So here is my cloud event. It has come through as a date time immutable. We've got the data as a record event. So we can turn that into a payload super quickly, just using some really easy kind of detection. And at this point, we want to say, okay, who does this belong to? This should be an authorized request, right? So what we also want to do, let's just wrap this in an array. We also want this to be authenticated. Right, so we want that to fail. API is not defined. Okay, we'll come back to that. Authenticated, cool. So now if we come back to here, we can come over to here and say API tokens. I want to be able to create, read, delete, and update. Steve's token. Create that. Copy this. And we're going to say that our auth is a bearer token. And that is it. Close, done. And body and send. Still getting unauthenticated. So let's just go back to the docs here and say sanctum. Protecting roots. We want to say auth sanctum. There we go. That is now coming through. What we also want to do is when that request comes in, we want to verify that it will go to that project. So we need another bit of middleware and say, make a little middleware, and we're going to call this project key header. I'm going to just give it a really specific name here. We're also going to say project key header. Let's just pull that in. Again, declare some strict types. Final. Drop this. And we're going to do that. Do a bit of this. Remove some of those spaces. Simplify that one. So if we do not have the header, X project key, then again, we're going to do exactly the same as we did before. Say missing header. Before we do that, we're going to say responsible. Boop. So missing header, missing project key header. So this should now fail. And then we are going to move forward at this point. So we just want to ensure that it is there. So this is missing it. So we want to say X project key. We're just going to do a random key for now. Getting out internal server error because we are just dying dump. So at this point, we've got the project key. We're going to come here and we're just going to copy that. This is what we want it to match. So for now, I'm just going to paste that in. We've got the project key. So then we come over to our ingress. And at this point, we've got the payload. We know the headers. What we want to do is accept it, dispatch a background job to handle it, and just return a response. This is an ingress controller. We want to do as little work as possible. So we can say a make job ingress pass payload. So here we want to dispatch a new pass payload. Don't know why that's not being detected. Let's just reload from disk a second. Pass payload. Okay. Close a dump quickly. Let's just reload all of that stuff there. And now try again. Dispatch new pass payload. What is going on there? Why are you just ignoring me? Darn it. There we go. So this will take a payload as that request payload. And the project key is going to be request header X project key, like that. That is all we want that to do. So pass payload, this accepts two properties into the constructor. So public read only. Let's just go make sure that is the event. Yep. Event payload there as a payload. Public read only string as the project we want to use. So let's just declare some strict types there. Use that. Use and use. There we go. So we're dispatching that. Return a new message response where the data is going to be request accepted and the status is status accepted. This is going to return responsible, and we are all tied up and we are good. So at this point I can come over here and say burp class app blah blah blah. Okay, so composer dump again. There we go. Request accepted. Nice and quick. It's working. So this passing the payload, what we want to do is first fix that, and we want to check that the project property matches the project in the payload if it is a record event. If it's not, it's just an identifier, and we don't have to worry. So at this point, let's just do a quick dump on this payload. We're using that so we can say, okay, so we can do a quick check on the data. If this payload data instance of record event, then we want to do a check. We're going to do a quick if check. I hate these embedded ifs, but sometimes you need them. So this project does not equal this payload data project. No, we're not passing that key, are we? At this point, we need to do a lookup. Okay. Do a lookup on the project and the saved project. So let's have a quick think. Is this going to work? That isn't going to work. I just had a thought it will not work. So we're going to drop that middleware for now, actually. I don't think it's adding the benefit I want it to. So I'm just going to drop that because it's not going to do what I want it to do just yet. Except cloud event, that's fine. Ingress controller, we don't need to pass that through anymore. Passing the payload, we don't need to worry about that. We just need to do some stuff there. Ingress request, that's fine, fine, and fine. So this header can actually go for now. Request accepted. Right. Okay. We didn't need to do that because of the way I want it to work. I was thinking too many steps ahead. It happens. Now, I've been going for about an hour now, so I'm just going to hide this up a little bit and see what we can do. At this point, we're going to save this payload. We've already authorized the request and the person. I suppose what we also want to do is pass through. No, we don't need to pass through that, do we? Let's just go check that event model. Identity project. We've already got the project. Let's go double check the project quickly. That does need a team. So we do need to know the team. So maybe we need something else. I'll think about that in a moment. We'll just pass the payload for now. So when we're passing a payload, what we want to do is we're going to have a service to handle this. So let's go app, directory, services. We're going to have our event ingress service. This will have a public function construct. This needs to accept a private read-only database manager as the database. Make that. So I can now pull this into here. Service. The first thing we want to do is what type of event is it? Because if this is an identify request, do this and return. If this is a record event request, do this other thing. So at this point, we need to do that detection and say, okay, so what event type are we using? Because we're going to process them differently. So how to do this. If this payload data instance of identify event, record event, then we want to say that the channel equals service create new channel. We're going to do that basically. Basically, we want flexible channels. So channel belongs to a project and just has a name. It's relatively simple. So if we come over to here, we want to say public function create new channel. String name, string project. This wants to return a channel or just a model. So return this database transaction where the callback is channel query create where the name is name and the project ID is project. Good morning, Albert. So that will give us that. So passing the payload, we can do that. We want to get the name of the channel. So we can say this payload data channel, and the project is this payload data project. So at that point, we've created the channel. Once we've created the channel, we also want to store the event. There's a lot of things I need to figure out here with storing this. Because do I want to do it this way? Because identify needs to belong to an event as well. So let's go. This also needs to have a project. Public string project ram string project. Project needs to be a string as well. So project data project like that to array identifier and properties. That is all good. Sorry, my internet booped a second there. So all I've done there is come to this and add the project. The project, I'm not going to add it down here because it's not vital, but it is a public property. So I will be able to access it later on anyway. So only difference between the two is how we treat them. So we only create a channel if it's a record event. If it's an identity request, then we want to create or update an identity, and then we want to save the event. If it is not an identity, then what we want to do is create the new channel. We also want to ensure the identity channel exists. Create the new channel, save the event. So the main difference here is this one, we're ensuring a channel exists. And this one is ensure the channel exists. So if it's an identity request, then we need to use identity channel. If it is not an identity request, we're either using an existing channel or we're going to create a brand new one like that. Then both times we're saving the event. So the only difference here is that create or update an identity. So if it is an identity request, so if this payload data instance of an identity, then what we want to do is create or update an identity. So service create or update identity. And we are just going to pass in this payload data through to that. Public troll me or where? Could be. I don't want to do that. That isn't going to be used. Ingress request, don't need. Event factory, don't need. Process payload, I can drop. Create or update identity. This is what we want. Public function, create or update an identity. So we are going to accept an identity event as the identity, and this is going to return an identity model. Return this database transaction where the callback is identity query update or create, and the attribute we are tying this to is the identifier, which is the identity identifier, and then the values is properties identity properties project ID and identity project. So we got basically the project needs to exist. So in our ingress request, both datas are going to have a project. So that is going to be required string, and needs to exist in projects under the ID. So now if we do that, selected data is body project doesn't exist. So we pass that off to here and say that. Perfect. Event ingress service doesn't exist. Not a problem. That's just the way that I'm doing stuff. So that part now works. We can identify that. Identity, update or create. Identifier based on the project, because different people may have the same identifier across projects. It happens. And the properties, we're just going to kind of update the properties or set the properties. Hopefully that just does intelligent merging, but we'll see. So this part here, event data. Okay, I'm not going to worry about that. That should just work. So that is the identity here. Identity there. So we've done that, create or update an identity. The next thing is kind of ensuring that a channel exists. So we want to say service. We want to make sure that we create the channel first. So service ensure channel. The payload we're passing is this payload data. So let's go make that ensure channel. Public function ensure channel. This is going to get event data coming in as a payload, and this should return a channel back or a model. So ensure that so maybe we can do a check here instead. What can we do here without making it too ugly? So a record event will have a channel name. An identify event will have nothing. So if data property doesn't this is going to start getting messy. Okay, so if array key exists, payload to array. So the key I'm looking for is channel. So return this database transaction. The callback, I'm just going to start with a default. We are going to say channel, query, update or create. The attributes are going to be the name, payload. So if we look at the record event, we should have channel directly. So channel, or we're going to call this identity channel, like that. And then we're going to have the project ID as the payload project, because both of these should have a project ID coming through that has been validated. Then the values. That's it. Update or create that. And that's it. Ensure that channel. That, in theory, should create the channel. And then we want to save the event. So service save event, where we pass through the payload as this payload. And we're going to say that the channel is channel. So let's go make that. Public function save event, where we get event. The event coming through. Payload coming through as an event. Yeah, event. So where that event comes in as event payload, because I want the event model to be typed. There's a payload, then the channel as channel. And this should return an event model. Right, so done that part. That part works, and we're doing that part, and we're doing that bit. So, messy. Okay, so channel or model. So we want to save this at this point. Return this database transaction where the callback is event query create. Now, the attributes is going to be, we've got this payload here, and this should turn, we should have a way to turn this into something for the database. We need a way to save this in the database, right? Now that event model, I think the biggest problem is that I don't have all the fields that I'm going to want, do I? So we got most of them. Yeah, I need to do some refactoring on this model to add a few additional columns to match the ingress and make it map a little bit nicer. So I'm going to call it a day there because I am in desperate need of coffee. But as usual, thank you for joining me. Actually, I'm going to go big. Thanks for joining me. That was a lot of fun. We'll see what we can do next time. And yeah, thanks for joining in. Catch you next time.